Good morning. My name is Anthony Hamilton. I am the CEO of Georgina Energy, listed on the London Stock Exchange with helium, hydrogen and natural gas projects in Australia.
Anthony, good to have you back in London.
Thank you.
Thanks for coming and seeing us. Now, last time out, you just done the IPO, launching the story. What have you done since I last saw you?
Well, interestingly enough, people seem to forget that we've only been listed for a very short period of time. And if my memory serves me correct, I think we've put out between 12 and 14 RNSs since we were admitted. Primarily, our focus has been on ensuring we complete all the necessary elements to obtaining our drilling permit for Hussar, as well as undertaking a whole range of different activities relative to Mount Winter, following the meeting on the 11th of September in Alice Springs, which ultimately
With who?
With the Central Land Council and the traditional landowners.
Right.
And the purpose of that is that Mount Winter's been under application for 16 years. So the process that we are engaging in is to obtain...
What's that mean?
Under application means that it's been under application for 16 years, for essentially development.
Right. But it hasn't moved forward in 16 years?
It's never been approved.
Why?
A variety of reasons.
Not under your tenure, though?
Nothing to do with us.
Okay.
Since we've been there, we've actually managed to get the meeting. We've managed to get granted extensions. And as I said, we had the meeting on the 11th of September. It was a very successful meeting. And the process is pretty straightforward. In order to get the permit granted, you need to get the approval of the traditional landowners, who then, via the CLC, which stands for Central Land Council, they then formally write to us and confirm that fact. Once they do, then an agreement is executed, which essentially covers access agreements. And then all those documents are sent to the minister and he grants the permit.
Okay, so just want to be clear, because there's processes for these things.
Absolutely.
You can't
shortcut it.
There's no shortcuts, right? So September 11th, the output of that was a confirmatory letter saying that traditional landholders are okay with what you do. Is it subject to anything? Is it subject to sort of environmental or any other kind of...
The process that we have undertaken is that we presented to the traditional landowners and the CLC our plans. On the basis of that, they then go away and make a decision, which they then formally notify us in due course through the CLC.
How long does that take?
That could probably take, well, traditionally anywhere between 28 to 35 days, roughly, give or take.
Not months.
No.
Not necessarily, right.
So, and it's a procedure. They have a set procedure under the Aboriginal Land Right Act, where they have to follow a certain procedure, which they're doing at present.
Yeah.
We made the presentation, we made the representations. Our Indigenous consultant is a gentleman called Bob Liddell. He's Indigenous Aboriginal himself and a tribal elder. And so we put forward to them what we were going to do. They've now gone away. In the event that they agree and grant, then an agreement will be reached. Those documents will then be provided to the Minister of Mines in the Northern Territory, and he will grant the permit.
Can you do anything before that? Are you doing anything else whilst
Well,
that process
we're
is
actually,
happening?
our degree of confidence for a successful meeting is we've started reprocessing the seismic for Mount Winter.
Okay.
And we're not undertaking that lightly because it's considerable expense.
Yeah.
But at the end of the day, we have a high degree of confidence.
Okay. I'm going to stick with this part of the timeline, if you don't mind. You've also announced that you have got conversations going on with a group in Australia and you've kind of given some clues away there as to who they may be. It would suggest that there's a kind of large balance sheet attached to it. What is that? What are those conversations for? What's the outcome that you're hoping for?
We made an announcement some time ago about the fact that we had targeted a series of wells, roughly 200 plugged and abandoned wells reduced to 168, then reduced to 20, and then reduced to 10.
Okay.
And we've had a consultant reviewing those 10 targeted wells. We signed a confidentiality agreement with an Australian public company listed, which has onshore production,
Right.
but also has a significant acreage of exploration plugged and abandoned leases.
Okay.
The agreement we have in place is for 24 months. It is to exchange and review data between the parties
Yeah.
to determine whether the terms of a farm-in or potentially an outright purchase can be agreed.
Okay, so let me be clear. So that suggests there's like one of three companies, all of which are a bit chunky. With regards to, there's two things going on. There's potential acquisition and then there's farm. And let's go with the acquisition bit first. Potentially acquisition of what? All of it?
No, whatever interest they hold in the respective project.
Okay.
Because like most projects, there are multiple partners. So in a lot of historical projects, you would have had 3 or 4 parties who are participants, with the primary company being the operator.
Right.
So depending on who we're dealing with, we could be dealing with the operator, we could be dealing with the primary license holder, or we could be dealing with one of the parties that was committed or joined the joint venture at whatever point in time.
Right. Okay, I'm just trying to understand who those parties are now. Are they connected to you now? Because if you've got a confidentiality agreement, but that's with one party?
That's with one party, but we're communicating with numerous others. It's primarily, the purpose of this has been because we're in advanced discussions with a public company, it was appropriate that we execute a confidentiality agreement. The others are conversations that are being held that have not resulted in a position.
Great. So I will be interested in them, but not now. So with the public company party that signed a confidentiality agreement to share data, what's the end game there? Is it acquisition and or farming?
I think it's more than likely going to be a farming.
Right. Okay. So let's look at
acquire a farming to acquire a percentage of their interests. They'll still retain an interest, but we'll essentially obtain an interest which gives us operatorship, and we can proceed to pursue our plan of re-entry for helium, hydrogen, and natural gas.
Okay. So let's look at some of the, just to spell out for people perhaps new to the way the kind of farming deals get structured. Okay. It's an agreement between two parties. It can pretty much look like anything you want, but broadly, they'll earn in over a period of time by spending X amount of money.
Well, in this case, if we're farming in, then yes, we will spend and meet certain commitments and spend a certain level of money in order to earn our interest.
Right.
In fact, no different from what we're doing at Mount Winter.
Got it.
With EPA 155. Once that minister grants the permit there, and we've reprocessed the seismic, we have a 75% interest.
Over a period of
Mount
time.
Winter.
No, but and that's gained over a period of time.
No, that 75% interest is gained right at the start and registered. And so that means that there are certain conditions we have to meet, which we will have met.
Such as?
Reprocessing the seismic, providing, getting the permit, submitting a work plan, and meeting all the financial obligations for a program that we've been submitted to the Northern Territory Mines Department.
Okay. And obviously things...
And then ultimately also the execution of a JOA, which is a joint operator agreement.
Right, okay. And you'd be the operators?
Correct.
Okay, fine. Okay.
We presently are the operator. We're the ones running the programs and developing it. And then that gets formalised under the farming agreement.
Okay, understood. So there are conversations happening. We will hear more. What's your expected timeline on that?
I think people need to understand that the agreement was signed for 24 months.
Okay.
This is not something that happens overnight. And when you're dealing with mature, large production companies, they have procedures and policy, and they have boards, and they have management, and they follow a set procedure. So it will go through a fairly tortuous program before ultimately an agreement gets reached.
Yeah.
Then it'll be a case of going to our board at Georgina to put the proposal, for them to agree that they want to do it, and then it'll be formally announced. But it'll be announced by both parties.
Okay, so the process underway. Let's jump back into the project. So one of the things that you've said in your press releases is that you will be looking to go to site. I mean, you're here in the UK for a week or so, are you?
Yeah,
a couple of weeks?
We'll have been here till the end of the month, give or take.
Okay, and then you're going to head back to Oz, Western Australia, and you're going to go to site.
Then I'm going to fly to site.
Why?
So Hussar, which is our primary target at present, we are, as part of the permitting process, we are required to commit an environmental study and a heritage study with the traditional landowners at site. And we're also going to be taking the operational company, Aztec Well Construction, so that they will do a preliminary investigation of the site for the planning for the re-entry to commence in December. In order for the permit to be granted, we need to complete the environmental impact study, we need to complete the heritage study, we need to give DEMAs a report to say we've been to site and here are the relative reports. And then once they get that, that's the last part of the parcel for them to then decide to grant us.
Well, let's talk about that. Because you said a few words there, which I think most people would be going, crikey, what's that involve? Heritage study, so environmental study and then heritage study as well. Is that a long process?
No, it's a 5-day site visit.
5 days?
5 days. Our environmental impact study has been done over a large area outside of the site. Yeah. And that was done by desktop because there's a significant amount of environmental...
By you guys?
Or yes, by our team. Consultants.
Yeah.
And there's a significant amount of available information through a variety of different bodies, including the West Australian Government.
And that meets all standards?
And so we know, so that meets all standards. But then practically, the impact that we have is on an area of less than 500 metres squared, which is the original drill pad.
Right.
So we practically go to site, our environmental consultants come to site with the traditional landowners and the Aboriginal rangers, and we do a complete inspection of the site to determine that there's nothing there that's going to be a problem from their perspective and ours.
So hang on, so 500 metres square. Is there anyone living around there? Is there any impact on any people? No, none of that.
In fact, I have a picture of the well when it was drilled in 82. Yeah. And I have a picture taken about...
Maybe it gives that and we'll pop it up in the video here.
Yeah.
If you can. Yeah.
I have a picture of it taken 2 weeks ago. Yeah. And not much has changed.
It's a bit dry out there, isn't it?
A little.
50-degree heat. It'll be fine. Okay. So that's kind of interesting to me. The environmental thing, that process, it can be carried out by desktop. I know it's not a big chunk of land you're looking at, but getting the traditional owners there is important.
Very important.
Right.
It's part of our agreement So again, people don't quite understand. We have an Aboriginal land access agreement in place.
Right.
And that land access agreement gives us all the access rights to the permit. But at the same time, and I was asked this question previously, there's no restriction on us. We just have a procedure to follow. And that procedure is that when we do anything, we notify the traditional landowners of what we're doing.
Okay, so let's say you get, whilst you're there, for the week that you're there, you get that kind of signed off by the traditional owners, both the environmental and the heritage. What do you do with those documents?
Those documents get lodged with DEMAs, right? Because they're essentially a precondition for the granting of the permit. You have to do that, right, to in order for DEMAs to grant you the permit. Because again, it's procedural.
So these are documentation that you need to get
correct, which is essentially what we've been doing.
Okay, so let's say that permit. How long does that permit then take to be issued from the sign-off of the environmental and
Permit
heritage?
will be issued sometime early in December, I would think.
So this side of Christmas.
Yes, absolutely.
Okay, interesting. You get the permit, then what happens?
Well, based on our November site visit, then basically drill rigs, excavators, and the engineering team will be on site.
And let's look at that process, okay, because it's really important. First of all, let's be clear, it's a permit to do what?
It's a permit to drill.
Okay, so you get everyone there, presumably early January.
No,
So
they'll be there in December.
literally, as soon as you get this permit, you are mobilising.
We're on site.
Okay, and what do people have to do?
So primarily, one of the first things that we will do is the wellhead itself, which is at the surface, has a pressure inspection plate on it.
Okay,
So
from which era? How old is that?
oh well, it's been there since '82.
Right, reliable?
Yeah, it's intact. It's been inspected.
Would you
It's
replace
intact.
this?
Well, this is okay. You're jumping ahead because
Oh, am I? Oh,
there's
good.
a procedure. The first procedure is that we'll take an excavator,
Yeah.
a 20-ton excavator on site. It will excavate around the casing,
Yeah.
primarily down about probably 2 metres, maybe a little bit deeper.
Let's remind people what you've got in existence already. So in terms of that hole, what does it
So-
look like today?
It's basically a concrete pad
Yeah.
with a pipe sticking up out of the middle of the ground.
And what's underneath that?
The well.
Okay.
It's pretty obvious.
Right. It's got casing in place.
So the casing, the reason is that we excavate around the casing
Yeah.
to determine that its integrity,
Okay.
to make sure that it's in good shape. We also pressure test because the first plug is at 30 metres.
Okay. So you're checking pressure from 30 to surface.
So we've got that inspection valve, which means we can check that there's no pressure there.
Right.
Assuming that, and we don't expect there to be an issue, if there's no pressure there and the casing is intact,
Yeah.
then we will cut the wellhead off and we will weld a new wellhead on.
Well, that's what I was talking about. So the
Then-
wellhead and the pressure gauge replaced new.
Correct.
Right. Okay.
And then what we do is we bring in the rig, the first rig, and we drill out the first plug at 30 metres.
what type of rig?
It'll be an air core,
Okay.
just a fairly lightweight rig.
AC. Okay. Yeah.
That rig will then there'll be a whole series of things that our engineering team will need to do to determine what our next move is. If everything goes according to plan, and again, the integrity of the casing and everything else is good, and we drill through the first plug without any major issues, then that rig will go and a primary rig will come in with a BOP section on it for probably somewhere between 6,000 and 12,000 PSI.
Okay.
BOP.
Much bigger.
And primarily because that rig's going to drill down to 3,200 metres. And the bottom of the hole was at 2,040.
Okay.
Now,
Good to know.
the key element there is that the primary plug, the one that has all the pressure behind it,
Yeah.
and is down at 70 metres.
So, right, so you've got one at 30, which you've now bust through, drilled through. You're now hitting one at 70.
We then bring in the bigger rig,
Yeah.
which has the BOP capability.
Right.
And it then breaks through that
Yeah.
and drills into the main
So that's
well.
exposed. From 70 metres down to 2,040 metres is exposed. So, and I know you're going to go
primary
1,000
hole.
below that, but in terms of what's between 70 and 2,040 right now, what are you expecting to be able to see?
No, well, one of the historical things that we knew about was that they had gas at 1,100 metres, and then they had gas at 1,900 metres.
Okay, so what's happening in the ground there in terms of that strata?
Well, the generally held view is because they were drilling for oil drillers don't like gas.
They used to flare it a lot, still do actually.
Well, they don't like gas when they're drilling a well, particularly a exploration well. So what they did was they overweighted the mud,
Okay.
which killed the
Right.
gas.
Okay. Yeah.
So bear in
sealed
mind,
it off,
It
presumably.
sealed it off. Well, there was no flow. Once they overweighted the mud, there was no flow.
So 1,100 and 1,900 is what we're looking for. Okay.
So, and at that point, they weren't looking for gas, so their interest in that is limited. And obviously, they drilled their hole down to 2040. They didn't get what they were looking for, so they plugged the well and abandoned it. Our perspective is, we know that once we punch through the primary plug, it's a ride all the way down to the bottom of the hole at 2040. We'll have, depending on the state of the casing, the original casing is 8 5/8 of an inch. One of the considerations for us is that when you get to the bottom of the hole, you can't have a diameter below a certain size, because essentially it's like trying to suck a golf ball through a straw.
I'm saying nothing.
Hopeless.
Yeah.
So there's a whole range of technical issues that we need to deal with, but that's one of them. So it's not just a simple exercise of just drilling a hole. And it may even be that ultimately, if we encounter any problems with the re-entry, then again, and we've covered this, we'd sidetrack the well, which means we'd pull the gear up out of the well and re-enter, sidetrack it and re-enter down at 200 metres.
Okay.
But the plan is to go vertical all the way down to the subsalt Townsend formation.
And then how do you expose those kind of that kind of thick mud where at 1100 and 1900 where perhaps gas has been sealed off? And how does the gas start to be encouraged to flow again?
Oh, the gas will be encouraged to flow because we're going through the zone into the Townsend or subsalt formation, which is what hosts the natural gas, the helium and the hydrogen.
What level's that? Sorry,
that's at 3,200.
So I want to make sure. Are you saying, well, let's not worry about the stuff at 1100 and 1900?
We're not worried.
You want to get after the.
That was a zone that was encountered on the way down, and that could mean anything.
Right. Okay. So it's as far as you're concerned, financially, it's not a big part of your equation as to what you think.
Doesn't form part of our process that we're looking at. We're interested in the subsalt Townsend barrier to penetrate that, because that's what hosts.
Would you ever? I mean, once you get this hole done, obviously, and we're looking in January timeframes. It's not exactly far away.
Well, it's a 50-day program.
Okay, February.
So we said, and have always said, we'll be on site to commence drilling in December, and we will.
Okay.
And barring any unforeseen problems, it'll be a 50-day program to complete the job.
Okay. Sorry, again, I'm going to get ahead of myself here. In terms of the platform that you're drilling from, it's one vertical hole. At any point, what kind of data would you need to see to say, well, hang on, maybe we need some horizontal in here as well. Maybe we need to drill from the same pad off into different, diagonal holes as well. I mean,
well, you're jumping ahead. Right? Our expectation is that won't be needed.
Okay.
But at the same time, we have a high expectation that we'll encounter gas. At the moment, there's no particular reason to change our thinking. And I have a whole lot of people, a whole lot smarter than me, geophysicists and geologists, currently working on the Hussar model. I think, as we said in one of our announcements, we are reprocessing the seismic from that.
Yeah.
We actually, if you look at it, the original 2D seismic was shot in the late 70s. The well was drilled in the 80s. It was reprocessed in 2002, which wasn't available to us. We signed a agreement with a group for the data, a data sharing agreement. And so we're presently reprocessing all of that 2002 data, along with the overlay from our AEM PTP aerial survey that we completed.
Question for you. It's one hole. I think it's, it could be viewed as fairly binary in terms for the hole. Either this hole works or it doesn't, like a lot of holes. It either works or it doesn't.
I don't think it's that simple. It doesn't.
Okay,
it's not a case, because the reservoir itself, it may extend for a couple of kilometres, whether it's down dip, up dip, and as has been explained to me by numerous geologists, the subsalt Townsend formation could be a great big balloon, a shape like that.
Okay,
So
it's not
depending on where we
salt crust.
No, it's not it's not like a billiard table. It isn't
Yeah,
flat.
yeah.
It's under pressure, and it could be that shape.
Okay. So, and you've got to find.
We essentially look at the end of the day over time. Traditionally, and we had the same circumstance many years ago, where an original well was drilled into a structure. And then subsequently, once the well was up and running, and new seismic was shot, they determined that there was an extension. So they drilled another well into the extension.
Yeah, no, I get it. What I'm trying to answer here is that as an investor, right? I want to understand the likelihood of success, and I can invest accordingly, as in terms of my own view and risk profile. If you're arguing against it being fairly, not necessarily binary on this whole, and therefore maybe not binary on the company in terms of success for the company, I can buy that, and I get the whole thing about managing the field. You've got to manage the gas flows, oil flows, whatever you're not you, but generally these things are well understood. If this hole doesn't give you what you want, what happens next? What does that mean for you?
Well, from our perspective, we have a high degree of expectation that the hole will deliver.
Tell me why.
Because of the historical information we have, because of the information we understand, the consultants that we use, the people that have a better technical understanding than I do. It simply isn't just a case of we're essentially drilling on the old adage of where X marks the spot.
What's that mean?
Well, that's historically where they were targeting the original well for oil.
Oh.
That doesn't mean that we may well encounter gas and we may well encounter flows, but the big $1 million question is, will it flow enough? And will the analysed concentrations of helium and hydrogen be enough? In the first instance, if we get gas and we get concentrations, no matter how big or small, then we would then look to, do we sidetrack, move further along the structure,
right,
to increase the volume of what we're producing.
Okay, so you're saying because all data is good data?
All data. So the outcome is, as I said to someone previously, is we could end up in a situation where we just get natural gas and nothing else.
Not a tragedy, is it?
Woe is me.
Yeah.
I'm a gas producer.
Yeah, okay. So basically, your hope is that it's not just a technical success, that it's a financial success.
Correct.
But if it turns out to be a technical success and that shows indications of, all three, you're just moving along structure.
It's essentially,
Right,
you're talking, not a lot of holes have been drilled in the Office Basin. And if it delivers what we think it does, then it opens up an amazing opportunity for us. Because bear in mind, it's 3,500 square kilometres, our licence.
Okay, so the trouble with small companies is if money was easy to come by, you could crack on and do lots of things, but it's managing money in the most efficient way.
Correct.
Right? You've got to do things, and so you're getting after this hole, you're not sort of chasing multiple targets.
Well, we're not. We're very focused.
So from that perspective, I'm looking at you going, right, okay, January, February, big months, right?
Yep.
Is there anything between now and then in terms of like the pressure readings, etc., that we can read into and get a sense of actually this is moving along, or is it a case of, look, come on, there's a lot of admin between now and the drill hole going in, and that is something we've got to do, but we're waiting. There's a waiting between now and January.
It's practical. It's in all, aside from everything else, drilling and intersecting the Townsend heavy tree. Or the subsalt, formation, answers all the questions.
Right.
It's as simple as that. There's no...
What was the question?
Is there gas down there or not?
Okay, yeah.
When we drill it, I'll be able to tell you.
There's a lot of gas is my question.
And the question is that we won't know that
until
we penetrate it and see what we've got in terms of a flow rate for gas and what the composition of helium and hydrogen is. And bear in mind that it's also going to come up with nitrogen. It's going to come up with water. It's going to come up with bitumen. It's going to come up with, it's going to come up with a whole lot of different things. So there's a lot of analysis. So once the gas is brought to the wellhead, That's just the beginning of the process, because then there's 3 months roughly where we bring the reservoir engineers in. We probably shoot some new seismic to just determine whether or not the reservoir itself is bigger than we think. At the same time, we've got to flow test it. We've then got to do it for a period of time so that when we get to the point, we can hand each of the off-takers, there's the results, there's the flow rates, that's the composition of the helium and the hydrogen. It's sustained. The rate of flow is X, whatever that is.
Let's jump to the kind of, let's assume success, and we're flowing gas, and you're measuring that to sort of see what the kind of drop off looks like, and
well, it'll be a 3-month exercise.
Yeah. So it will be. What does success in one hole mean for the company in terms of how I should value this thing?
I think in the first instance, probably the biggest thing would be that we get a flow of gas. If we get a flow of gas and it's a sufficient flow, and it has a composition of helium and hydrogen in it, then we're sitting on the reservoir. That's the first thing. The second thing is that the off-takers, depending on which one that may be, one of the conditions that we have set with the off-takers was that in the event that it's economic and sustainable and it meets their requirements, then we want to be reimbursed for our entire development costs for that well.
Which is?
Whatever that number comes out at, ultimately, when we're finished. But it's going to be somewhere around, I reckon, about 1.5, 1.6 million.
Which in itself is not crazy.
It's not a big amount of money, but we're very cost effective in our approach and the way we're doing this.
Okay, let me be clear. You're getting close to that sort of money shot, as it were, if I'm allowed to use that phrase, where the timeframes are not long.
No, they're not.
The money is not that much. In terms of the return on investment,
we're fully
is not
funded
bad.
right through the process.
I get it.
So we don't have any expectation that we need to come to market. And the other side of that is, if I'm successful, if my team's successful, and we get gas, and we get sufficient quantities, then we'll be tapping the off-taker on the shoulder, and whatever the final cost of the development is, I'll be getting a check off them for our cost to be reimbursed, to be banked back into the company. Now that money, bear in mind, then becomes the funding mechanism for Mount Winter.
Yeah, but that's not a re-entry, is it? Is that a re-entry?
That's a re-entry as well.
So that's cheap as well. Okay, so we're good. I guess the new holes in each, Hussar and Mount Winter they'll cost a little bit more, but you'll know a lot more at that point.
What everybody needs to understand is the one well at Hussar, the discovery, is not the only well. You're not going to get all the gas you want out of one well. You're going to have to drill multiple wells over the reservoir to get the flow rate
field management
for the off-taker.
Absolutely.
The off-taker is only going to do that if he knows, because when we ultimately agree a deal with the off-taker, and there are a number of them, there's only one MOU signed, but there are a number in the wings, then our position is we're not just offering Hussar, we would be offering Mount Winter as well. So therefore, our leverage is...
But they're two different basins, right?
Yeah, one's the Officer Basin and one's the Amadeus Basin.
Right. So
one's the Townsend subsalt, the other one's the Heavy Tree.
I guess what I'm trying to understand is, right, you get 1.5 million back, say, from an off-taker, and say, okay...
Well, that's our cost, but then all of the other costs that go up to doing that, including all the permitting and all the rest of it, so the number could be...
They'll also,
at least 2.5 million.
You'd also like to cover that. Okay.
Absolutely.
Okay.
We want all our costs associated with the development of that well.
Okay, so let's take a look at the off-taker. In terms of size and scale, etc., of what they're going to need to see to be able to say, right, we will start trucking this stuff up to wherever. What do those numbers look like in terms of the off-take?
Well, at the moment, we have just I think we announced just recently, we've just engaged a scoping study.
Right.
The primary reason behind that is so that we get a sense that we know what those numbers look like for the off-taker.
Right.
At the end of the day, that will determine the fact that everything that we've done on the basis of selling at a price at the wellhead of, I think, 285 at the wellhead.
Okay. What's the scoping study for? Is this pre or post well success? And what data are they using?
It's basically to provide a capital estimate, a costing and operating estimate, sensitivities on different price levels, particularly as there'll be a gas separation plant on site. So we'll be looking at the sensitivity of different pricing structures and different margins.
Okay.
And because we're doing the scoping study, we want to know what it is we'll be faced with. So when you're going to negotiate a price, we want to know that, okay, if we're negotiating X, that their margin is Y, whatever it is. We're not going to negotiate with the off-taker with one hand tied behind their back. We also did a salt cavern solution study. Okay. Now, we did that off our own back, again, because in America it's commonplace.
Yeah.
Salt solution mining for cavities, and then they store everything back in the ground. We did the study, spent the money. That we will give to the off-taker for free, almost. In that the cost of that study will be part of the cost of drilling the original well. But what it will mean for them is there's an avenue that they can investigate for on-site storage through the salt caverns storage system.
Uh-huh.
So this is not just a simple exercise. We've gone into this and we've investigated every element of what we're doing, including the things that we're not going to be responsible for, because we want to understand the implications for the off-taker. It's no point asking an off-taker to do something if you don't know whether it's going to work or not. I'd rather know that what we're asking him to do is financially viable, that we've provided him with the solutions for what he's doing. Some people might say, well, why don't you do it yourself? Well, I'm not going to try and go in the marketplace. Yeah. I can just see Georgina trying to raise 300 million, not a chance.
Yeah, less insane.
And we're selling it at the wellhead, and we'll sell it at a price, and all our modelling has been done at a price, which was the last auction price back in the US. So it's a low number, 28 cents or 280 per MCF. Currently, sale prices, 600. NASA signed a contract, 1,200. So we think at our price level, and we make good money at that price level.
And what's happening, just a slight segue if you don't mind, but what's happening in Oz at the moment? I saw a headline the other day, in fact it was in your website, talking about maybe for the first time in a long time, Oz is an importer of gas. Forrester's obviously selling it as LNG plants, etc. But there's a lot of demand over on the East Coast, lack of investment. It seems to be the message from this article anyway. What's the reality on the ground, and how's that going to drive prices? Or is it going to drive prices?
The domestic market is a bit of a strange one. Australia exports, I think, about 80% of its natural gas.
Yeah.
And we have LNG liquefaction plants on every major port on every coast.
Yeah.
That's caused a range of problems, particularly pricing problems in Australia and supply. Mm-hmm. But I don't know if you saw, but there's been an announcement about 2 weeks ago. There's a significant project in the Timor Sea, which Woodside are involved, and I believe they've just reached agreement. And that's going to produce significant amounts of gas. Mm-hmm. So I suspect the dynamics of all of that is going to change significantly. But having said that, the Australian government's spending $110 billion building a pipeline east to west.
Yeah.
And the reason they're doing that is because there is exploration onshore and offshore for gas and oil, but in this case for gas, which is being developed. And we're just one of a number of companies that potentially will exercise and participate in that. And I think there'll be a complete change in the domestic market. A complete change.
Meaning what? Increased prices, decreased prices?
No, I think ultimately it'll be a
freer
supply, freeing up of supply,
okay,
and possibly a decrease in the domestic prices,
right,
for the end consumer.
Yeah,
because that's where the pressure's coming from politically.
Yeah.
But having said that, we're sort of moving in the market from the point of view of helium and hydrogen, where that's not affected.
Yeah,
and so
different markets.
We're essentially
that's a good point to make.
gas.
We're talking specifically about gas and natural
Correct.
gas there. Then I would say that helium, hydrogen, very different dynamics and pricing structures. We're seeing to be under a lot of pressure to the up.
Well, it begs. There is another question, and that is that in the US now, helium is a
critical mineral.
Critical mineral.
Yeah,
and they're not allowed to export it. And so
should find it first.
Yeah, well, plenty of them finding it. I mean, no one still quite understands why they managed to get rid of their entire helium reserve as they did. But anyway, in our position, the Australian government's been extremely positive in its approach towards that. Mm-hmm. But again, if our discovery is successful and we start producing significant amounts of helium, there is also that issue of potentially the government stepping in and controlling how it gets sold and where it gets sold and to whom. I'm guessing that won't happen because Australia's pretty good when it comes to free market economy. But it is an element. And so, again, that's why when we did our original costings, we did a pretty low base that we sell our gas at, and we still make an extremely good margin. So we will accommodate whatever the environment is that we're faced with once we've got production running.
There's the key. Get
Thank
production
you.
running. So short time frame. I think that's the exciting thing here. Short time frame.
Yeah, I think...
well,
let's put it this way. What's the date today?
11th.
So this time in 30 days, I'll be standing in the middle of the Great Sandy Desert. And along with the TOs, along with our rangers, our engineers, our geologists, our technical directors or director, preparing to drive to site up the Gun Barrel Highway.
Good.
And yeah.
Send us a photo.
Oh, there'll be plenty of photos.
A picture of a temperature gauge.
No, you'll be able to tell that.
Yes. Sweating profusely.
From the sweat.
Appreciate your time today, Anthony.
Thank you very much.
Thanks for coming in and thanks for getting into the detail.
No, my pleasure.